please subscribe and don't forget to press the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload a new video.
Hi, welcome back. There's lots happening in the markets actually this morning. So it's a pretty interesting screen. The mid-cap index is up about 0.5% and a couple of these paper stocks have now surged to about 7-8% gains. So don't lose sight of that. Seshasai paper is up almost 8%. West Coast is up almost about 7.5%. JK paper is up about 4%. So that pocket is looking pretty good. And you have a couple of others as well that are hitting new highs this morning. PC Jewelers has hit a fresh 52-week high, up almost about 3% in equities, and they have a nifty target of 11,800 for December 2018. Sayan Mukherjee, the head of India Equity Research at Nomura, joins in now to talk about that. Sayan, it looks like new highs are inevitable in December itself. What kind of highs are possible, you think?
I think, 2017 is obviously, coming to an end. I think we are looking more towards 2018 now. We had 24% increase in the Nifty in local currency terms. We are projecting another 17% increase over the next calendar year. And, our thesis is largely driven by earnings. I know it has been a big disappointment last 3 years, but that's the change that we are looking forward to, that now you would see earnings actually getting delivered. We have seen rally in the market driven by macro over the last 3 years, the fiscal deficit, the interest rate environment, all these parameters, all these factors have played out, but earnings really has been a big disappointment. We see this as, a typical business cycle kind of being played out. So if you look at the BSE 500 companies that we have analyzed, excluding financials, the EBITDA margins are at an all-time low. And the ROEs, which used to be 22%, are down to something like just 12% currently. And a lot of purging has happened. Like, you've seen in telecom, from 12 players, we're down to 4. You're aware of banks making significant amount of provisioning over the years. In infrastructure space, we have seen new players emerging. The older guys are not really that active because they have a lot of debt on their books, etc. So I think, the cleanup has happened. So we are kind of closer to that. And, what makes us really very convinced about earnings is that it's a slightly medium-term call. I'm taking a 3-4 year view. We have seen that earnings to GDP ratio has fallen dramatically, and we have run a correlation, and we found a very good correlation, an inverse correlation of earnings to GDP versus the next 5-year earnings CAGR, and that holds for India, that holds for other markets, and a very high correlation. So we are at the bottom of that point on earnings to GDP, and our model suggests that we could even see a 20% plus earnings CAGR for the next 5 years.
Sayan, good morning. That's interesting. So for FY18 and 19 in particular, what's the estimate of earnings growth?
So FY18, like in the 6 months, I have seen the consensus estimates being cut by already 5%. We are looking at approximately 13% earnings growth in fiscal 18. If you ask me, if I look at the first half versus the second half, we are approximately saying 36% increase half over half. I mean, typically we see it's somewhere in the range of 16-17%. So there is some kind of excess which is being kind of considered, because remember, Q1 was GST impact, Q2 saw recovery, and we would start seeing that further playing out. So we may be disappointed again to some extent, because these are significant disruptions which were there. But FY19, when I look at, I think we are talking about 23% earnings growth. And importantly, the point is, we will continue to see that, and we should continue to see that going into fiscal 20 as well. So that should help the PE multiples for the market.
But your economist is betting on a 7.5% growth next year. So which sectors can lead in terms of earnings growth? Or will it be consumption according to you? Will there be investment sectors leading from the front?
No, I agree with you. I think some of the sectors like consumer has done very well. So we actually are underweight consumer staples, primarily because of valuations. I think they have done well. They would continue to do well. But I think there are better alternatives one can look at as we look at revival in earnings and revival in economic growth. So we are overweight financials, particularly corporate banks, and also we are sticking to retail banks. We are not so positive on non-banks at this point in time. We are positive on oil and gas, autos, infrastructure construction, And among the beaten down sectors, we have overweight on healthcare. We just think that there's too much of correction which has happened, and there are pockets value have started to emerge. On the underweight, actually cement we are underweight. I mean, despite the fact that we are looking forward to a revival in construction activity, but I think historically investors have moved into cement as a proxy to this, and the valuations have moved up quite a lot. So that's the reason why we prefer ENC companies over cement companies.
Okay, you said NBFCs. So are you toning down your NBFC exposure and instead putting money in, say, PSU banks?
I think so, yeah. So, in fact, we think we are toning down, particularly segments like housing finance. We think that, there was easy liquidity available, the cost of fund was quite good. And the PSU banks were not in a position to lend, etc. So I think these companies benefited from that environment, and the stocks have moved up already. Now I think at the margin those things are changing. You're seeing the cost of funds going up now gradually, and I think some of these banks which are recapitalized will come and compete. So I think it makes sense to be somewhat cautious on that space. But on the other side you have the corporate banks where we think the credit growth should start to pick up as the whole issue of bad loans is addressed. And on the retail bank we continue to remain constructive the way they have most of these companies are recording growth. We think that valuation still is something which we can run with.
This looks unlikely, but if indeed the NDA were to lose in Gujarat, what could be the lows that the market can see? Because we've not seen any major correction this year.
So, in our report, we talk about a fair valuation range of 15 to 20 times, right? 1 year forward. So, we are at like 17 times 1 year forward. That's what we are valuing the market at. Well, I mean, if it were to be that bad, because I think irrespective of the election outcome, I think we remain constructive on the earnings, outlook. So, I think if the market were to, correct to something like 15 times, it becomes a very compelling case in our view, given the earnings recovery that we are seeing.
But what can be a downside at all? At worst, what are you expecting to see?
So if it goes from 17 times to 15 times, we are talking about roughly a 10% kind of correction.
Finally, will 2018 be the year of large caps or mid caps?
No, I think we remain constructive on the large caps names as well, because we are at the bottom of the cycle where actually the good quality companies are surviving, and the smaller guys are having a lot of issues. So I think we would stick to the front end names.
Okay, Sayan, thanks a lot for your time today. That's the view from Nomura, of course. Well, the market is holding on to the gains. In fact, it's not building on, but it's defending 10,300 on the Nifty, and the Sensex, of course, up 170 points. The Bank Nifty is up about 0.5%, mid-cap index up 0.5% as well. Good time to invite our experts back. Ashwini Gujral and Mitesh Thakkar now join us with fresh calls. Ashwini, not seeing any dip as of now. I mean, it looked like in the in the morning that there was one, but that's been bought. How would you approach the index from here on, and what would be the stock calls?
See, the change from Friday is that the Bank Nifty premium is now expanding. So that dip has been used to probably buy into the Bank Nifty, and given that today PSU banks are doing well on the back of State Bank upgrade, etc. I think the Bank Nifty can be bought from here, because that is the index which is likely to catch up on relative underperformance, say, on Friday. Overall, I think the first dip has been bought, so the bears are still not able to find strength. So both on Nifty as well as Bank Nifty intraday, you can get long. As far as individual stocks are concerned, Jet Airways is a buy with a stop of 685, target of 710. Arvind is a buy with a stop of 442, target of 460. And Indian Bank is a buy with a stop of 383, target of 400.
Do you track any of these paper stocks, Ashwini? I mean, they're in the news. Ruchira paper told us that, China banning waste paper pulp is a big positive for Indian companies, and they're getting a lot of inquiries. Any trades on Seychelles, JK, West Coast?
See, this news is not new. Ruchira Papers was at 50 bucks, last year. So a lot of this is priced, and if it's 2 months old, I think the people who needed to buy have probably bought. But Ruchira Papers above, say, 180 thereabouts, is having a fresh breakout. Next target here could be 225, 230. And once you mention China, things start to run up like graphite, etc.
Yeah.
So this may be the new graphite.
Okay, that could be the case. So, and the stocks have rallied a lot. So, and this is not yesterday's banning, of course, as the management was also telling us. So that caution should be taken on board. But Mitesh, your thoughts on the market action and your stock calls?
So I think the up move is still there, and I think, as I said, 10,340, 350 would be an area where profit booking could happen, and maybe in the next 1 hour we will be there. For the time being, I think I have 2 buy calls. In fact, Indian Bank is on my list as well. It's a buy with a stop at 379 for targets of 405. And Ruchira Paper, and I think the short-term charts of all the paper stocks today are showing some kind of an upward breakout. Price and volume action is good. So that's a buy with a stop at 175 for targets close to about 200.
Okay, very close to its target now. It's been a big move. In fact, Indian Bank is consensus buy. So Ashwini, is this the preferred play in the PSU bank space, Indian Bank?
Definitely, because today it seems that PSU banks are going to do probably better than private banks. So this one has just gone through a correction, 5-7 days correction, now just starting out a fresh breakout.
Okay, we have Prakash Gaba also sitting with us here in the studio. Prakash, good morning. Plenty of stocks to talk about today. Yeah. What's on your list?
Good morning. I think granules looks good to me. It looks like a up move has just started here. Targets that I have is between 135 to 138 zones. May take a day or two for that. And Mahindra stop below 129. Mahindra and Mahindra also looking good. Looks like it's getting its head up today. Target on the upside close to around 1427 zones. Stop below 1389.
Okay, Ashwini, one more stock check. We're talking about it in the morning. Bharti Airtel, your thoughts on what next here?
See, Bharti Airtel, we need probably the stock is resuming its uptrend. So maybe a retest of 560 thereabout seems likely, but whether that'll get crossed or not, I don't know. Because I would much rather be with Reliance, because that gives me similar exposure. Comparing the two, I think Reliance is still doing much better.
Okay, well, Biocon has hit another high today. I mean, no surprises here, but nevertheless, it's making new highs every day, 1% higher. And Motherson Sumi is the other one that's hit a new high. So that is at 375, looking pretty good over there. So a lot of these investor favorites are coming back into action these days. A quick word, Mitesh, from your end on some of these names, Biocon, Motherson Sumi, anything you like there?
See, in fact, both these stocks have been showing signs of an uptrend. Biocon is something which I believe, with that big gap up happening the last weekend, last week, I think, will show a lot of continuation on the upside. So even current levels, I'll be comfortable buying with a tight stop at 517 or just below it, and look for targets close to about 550, maybe even higher levels. Motherson Sumi, as I said, it's also run up a bit, but not the best of the patterns to get in right now. So maybe declines to about levels of 368, 365 would be a good entry point.
Okay, the other one which is making a big move, by the way, is ITC, and keep in mind it had a strong gain on Friday as well in last half an hour, and that stock is continuing its upward move. Ashwini, we have seen that in the past. The stock gets very excited around about budget time, but is there a trade on ITC?
Well, this move from not only Friday, from Thursday looks very interesting, because it's moved almost 10% in 3 days. So my sense is this is probably stronger than the earlier pullback rallies we've seen. We should get to 280, which is its 200-day moving average. Again, now nobody's interested. All the people who wanted to sell have sold. So chances are that you will now get a fairly clean trend going into the budget.
Okay, gentlemen, thanks for joining us and talking about all of these stocks. Let's move on to some bigger stories now. With the December 13 deadline for resolving cases from RBI's second defaulter list looming, CNBC TV18 learns that a majority of the 28 cases may now end up in the NCLT, even as banks rush to recast some large cases before Wednesday. Ritu Singh, who's been tracking all this very closely, joins us now to give us more. Ritu, over to you.
Thank you, Sonia. That's right. You know, there are 28 cases that were identified by the Reserve Bank of India in its second defaulter list. And at that time, RBI had given banks a deadline of 13th December to resolve all of these cases. Otherwise, they will be forced to be sent to the National Company Law Tribunal under the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. And, you know, as of the second quarter results, we spoke to many bankers and they've been on record saying that they're shoring up provisions for these accounts because they do not expect many of them to get resolved before the 13th of December. And now that deadline is on Wednesday. We spoke to quite a few bankers even over the weekend. What we understand is, you know, with the exception of cases like Soma Enterprises, where the Oversight Committee has approved restructuring under S4A, most of these cases, it looks like, will end up in NCLT. There are smaller cases, you know, a handful of them which have also been sold to ARCs, the likes of Uttam Galva Steels is where bankers are still trying to see if, you know, a stake sale is possible. Built, Jai Palajia, other small cases where they're hoping to recast before this deadline ends. But for the rest of them, and, you know, we have the list of all the 28 accounts that are under this, it looks like they will end up in NCLT. The one large interesting case to watch out for is Jayaprakash Associates, because remember their restructuring after the sale to Ultratech has been approved by the Bankers Consortium. It has also been approved by the company's board. So now the only remaining legal paperwork, etc., the bankers are hoping they can meet the December 13th deadline. Otherwise, that will also have to end up in the NCLT.
Okay, well, thanks for that, Ritu. But we need to get back to the markets because it is picking up some more pace now. Just look at the advance decline ratio. Almost 1,400 stocks on the advancing side. And, you know, all your favorites, Eicher Motors, you have a couple of others, Axis Bank, IndusInd Bank, all rallying now 1 to 2% higher on these names. So the trend looks really good. Do you think this could be the way the entire day shapes up?
Looks like, Sonia, because, you know, if we had two back-to-back trend days, if selling had to happen, it should have happened by now. And I think what would be key is now you have an intraday high from till 10 a.m. If that high is taken out, this market still has a lot of shorts, especially from the FI side. A lot of call shorts are there, a lot of future shorts are there, so they could be covered. But for me, and as I said in the morning as well, for me, this is the market's message that market wants to believe that, you know, the Gujarat election, that you know, the problem that the market thought it had about 1 week back, at least that's out of the way. So that domestic issue could be getting sorted. And of course, global cues are also looking up now. So for now, that template is back. And now you're within what, 150, 160 points of a new all-time high on the Nifty. That's been the template of this market.